I know this sounds clickbaity, but I'm going to show you why without a shadow of a doubt, the Recombinator is the single most broken way to craft in PoE 2 at the current moment. I made around 200 div doing recombs in the last few days. This is how I use them to their maximum potential. Now, when we were first introduced to the Recombinator, the dev said it was going to be around a 35% chance of combining two mods. When we compare this with PoE 1, where you can combine and get like two perfect tier 1 mods, it looks terrible. Then, when we actually look at the odds of hitting good stats on our gear, it looks even fucking worse. But PoE 2 is a much different game. You need far less for an item to be valuable. And if we play with the numbers, we can actually get solid recombines with a fairly high hit rate. So how do we maximize these numbers? There are two important factors for min-maxing combination chances. The first is affix tier and rarity. As you can see, when we reduce the tier of the affix, the odds of recombining increase. And as you can see here, if we replace a less valuable affix like evasion with a more valuable affix of the same tier like spirit, the success rate plummets. The last factor, and probably the most unintuitive, is that the eye level of the gear itself matters. If you look at the previous example where we have tier 6 hybrid percentage evasion and tier 8 flat evasion, you'll see it's a 30% chance to recombine, but our tier 6 hybrid is only eye level 69. If we swap out to an eye level 81 with the exact same tier, the odds increase by literally 10%. If you consider these bases cost less than 5x each, and at the time of the video, the price of the expedition materials costs less than 4x per recombination, you'll see that it costs less than 35x to create a body armor with max tier flat hybrid evasion and the third highest tier percentage hybrid evasion. Last league, that base alone would go for a div even if you bricked the last 4 affixes. But even in this league, it's still positive EV given that you have 4 chances to improve on the item greatly. But it doesn't stop there. That's not even the half of it. With the inclusion of the fracturing orb in 0.2.0, we can now fracture items, meaning that we can find items like this pretty easily. This cost me 5x to buy the base and 10x to fracture. Realistically, it'll cost you around 50 to 60x to hit, given that it's a 1 in 4 chance to fracture. But here we can do the same thing again. We can recombine with insanely good odds and have a chance to keep the fracture and create items like this, which are essentially very high rolls of the 3 best stats you want on body armor. If you remember earlier, the odds of recombining spirit with even a tier 6 evasion roll was incredibly low. But now we can essentially recombine any tier of spirit, a high tier percentage evasion roll, and a high tier flat evasion roll with a 50-50 chance to hit. Now the last thing to consider here is that you don't always get the fracture to stay on, but you can actually manipulate the odds past it being a 50-50 of it staying on or not. This is because the way bases are chosen in recombobs are through essentially assigning a higher weight to higher value affixes. So in this case, the 2 affixes we're combining are the lowest tier flat hybrid evasion and tier 6 percentage evasion. As a result, more likely than not, we'll see the percentage evasion base survive, thus killing the fracture on the first base. This is why if you've ever tried recombining a good roll on a shit base with a shit roll on a better base, you find yourself keeping the shittier base most of the time. What this means for us is when we recombine a fractured base with a non-fractured base, we want the stat we're recombining from the fractured base to be higher value than the one from the non-fractured base. If we do this, we can get the fractures to land the majority of the time the recombine is successful. This allows us to craft items like these pretty consistently and incredibly cheaply. I actually failed the 50-50 on the recombine around 15 out of 18 times, and after succeeding, I failed the fracture roll 3 more times because I didn't know about manipulating fracture odds yet. Given this terrible RNG, this armor only cost me like 10 div to make, and I'm easily able to sell it for more than 50. So when I say the Recombinator is overpowered, I'm not exaggerating, and I fully expect them to nerf this incredibly soon. Good luck. I hope you win more 50-50s than I did.